But from a legal perspective, what are some of the implications that buyers and sellers need to be aware of?
Okay, the first thing I think, a very common misconception a lot of people have, and it's one thing I want to dispel from the outset, is there's this perception that it's only a contract if it's in writing. Oh. And that is just not true. Our law recognizes oral agreements, often called verbal agreements, which is a misnomer because verbal means by word, which is written or orally, but that's just me being a grammar nerd. So our law will recognize a written agreement, it will recognize an oral agreement, and it will even recognize a tacit agreement, which is where the conduct of the parties is found to demonstrate that there has been an agreement, even if nothing was actually said.
And so I think it's quite important. Hands, Tracey, like would that fall under a tacit agreement?
No, well, yes, it could, but not necessarily. Sometimes a tacit agreement takes place because the parties conduct themselves in such a way that a court finds that it's quite evident that both of them understood what their mutual rights and obligations were. So it doesn't even have to be, in other words, what I'm saying is that not every agreement requires a formality. Okay. There are certain agreements in law which by law require formality, like the sale of land. A sale of land is only binding if it's in writing. Within the horse riding industry and the agreements that we're going to talk about today, I think it's important for people to realize that the fact that it is not in writing does not mean that the agreement which was concluded is not binding. The importance of reducing something to writing is that you can prove what was agreed. Mm. And that is so often overlooked, especially in an industry like ours, which is quite small. So we all do this. We all go out for wine and we conclude an agreement to sell a horse or lease a horse or stable a horse or breed a horse.
Or we accept payment for legal services in the way of.
Oh, we do that too. Yeah, we do that, but we don't talk about that. And people then go away and behave based on their understanding of the agreement. And 6 months down the line, everybody hates each other. Everybody is a crook, and you can't trust horsey people. And you know, there's a palaver which winds up in court, and that can often be avoided by written agreement. And I always tell my clients to be a little bit skeptical of people who won't reduce agreements to writing. I don't care if you're sleeping with them, married to them, or about to bear their child. If they're reluctant to put something in writing, you should perhaps reconsider your relationship. But that doesn't change the fact that agreements do not have to be written in order to constitute agreements. And we hear this all the time. Somebody will come to me and go, oh, well, there was no contract. And I'll have to say to them, well, actually, there was. There was an oral agreement. And we know this because you have behaved in terms of what you understood that agreement to be. So that's quite important to remember from the point of view of be careful what you commit to, and be careful what your behavior says about your understanding of the relationship. So that's just an initial. So basically, what you need for a contract of any kind for our purposes is firstly, it needs to take place between two people. You don't have an agreement with yourself. So you'll have two or more people concluding an agreement. You have to have some kind of mutual understanding of what the terms were. And the courts interpret that objectively and subjectively. In other words, they look at what the parties say they believe the terms were, and then they look at the way the parties behaved and they go, well, actually, it's quite clear that you thought these were the terms. Mm-hmm. If the terms are not clearly set out in an agreement, then the court will still enforce an agreement where the terms are ascertainable. In other words, if you don't agree on a price for something, but you sit over a glass of wine and you go, you know what, I'll sell this horse to you for the same price as I get for its brother. That's an ascertainable price. That's an enforceable term. What I'm saying is there's a lot of space. Courts don't like to lightly set aside arrangements between people.
Okay.
Good contract will make provision for what should happen if certain events take place.